The aliens of the ZH Collective prided themselves on their mastery of psychological endurance. Their people could withstand blistering heat, sub-zero frost, even exposure to deadly radiation. But there was one thing they themselves could not bear: silence. To them, silence was not peaceful. It was a suffocating absence of the sound waves that nourished their bio-oral systems. In utter quiet, their sensory organs became hypersensitive, twitching and firing until their minds dissolved into chaos. That was why the Chamber of Silence existed, an enormous, spherical structure deep within their research vessel, lined with sound-dampening alloys and vacuum-sealed layers that devoured every vibration. For the Earth, stepping inside for even a few minutes was akin to plunging into madness. Most never dared try. For centuries, they had considered it the ultimate endurance test, a place where no being could survive for long without losing sanity. When the humans first made contact, the Earth laughed at their fragility. Soft skin, brittle bones, short lifespans. Surely, they thought, these creatures would crumble faster than any other species when exposed to the chamber. Humans seemed built for noise, for chatter, for chaos. Even their sleeping cycles were filled with dreams, mutterings, and restless motions. Silence, the Earth concluded, would break them within minutes. So, they brought in one human, not a soldier, not a scientist, but a quiet figure dressed in simple Earth garments. Loose cloth pants, a plain shirt, bare feet. The human bowed politely before stepping inside, as if entering a sacred temple. The aliens sneered. This fragile creature would be clawing at the walls before long. The chamber door sealed. The lights dimmed, and then silence absolute. Not even the faint hum of machinery remained. At first, the humans simply sat cross-legged in the center of the floor, their eyes closed, their hands rested gently on their knees. Breathing in, breathing out, they settled into stillness. Minutes passed, then hours. From the observation deck, the aliens shifted uneasily. Their own antennae twitched violently just from monitoring the silence. Some had to leave, clutching their heads. Yet the human remained unmoved. 3 hours in, one alien muttered in disbelief. "Why has the silence not shattered its mind?" Another hissed, "No creature survives this long." But still the human sat, as if carved from stone, radiating not fragility but serenity. It was the first crack in the ZH certainty. The Earth Council had expected laughter, panic, or perhaps the human pounding desperately against the chamber walls, begging to be released. Instead, the being remained perfectly still, a faint rhythm in its chest, the only sign of life. At first, they thought perhaps the human had fainted. A technician adjusted the monitors to check brain activity. What they saw made the chamber echo with disbelief. "The neural patterns are stable," one alien gasped. Not just stable, the human's brainwaves flowed in steady, harmonious cycles, not at all the jagged spikes of stress the Zeth themselves experienced in silence. It was as if the human was thriving in the void. Rumors spread quickly through the ship. Zeph scientists abandoned their experiments to gather at the observation deck. Some pressed their forelimbs against the glass, antennae curling nervously. "What is it doing?" they whispered. "Waiting." Someone suggested. "No. Listening." The minutes turned into 4 hours, then 5. Still, the human remained. No trembling, no cries, no madness, just the slow inhale and exhale, the faint rise and fall of the chest. The longer they watched, the more unsettled the aliens became. The silence had begun gnawing at their own minds through mere observation. They felt phantom echoes in their heads, strange distortions in perception, yet the humans seemed untouched. At last, one of the elder scholars, her translucent skin rippling with agitation, spoke. "This is unnatural. Silence is death. No creature should welcome it." Another scholar countered softly. "Perhaps it is not death for them. Perhaps this silence is something else." The idea was dangerous. The Earth had always assumed silence was the great destroyer. But what if, for humans, silence was not an enemy but a companion? Suddenly the human moved. A collective hiss filled the deck. But instead of collapsing or clawing at their ears, the humans simply shifted posture, stretching their legs, folding them again, resting their palms upward this time. Their breathing deepened, slower than before. "They are going deeper," whispered a young technician, his voice trembling. "It is choosing to stay." The elders exchanged glances, their certainty unraveling. For the first time in Earth history, it was not the silence that seemed powerful, but the fragile human sitting inside it. The alien council chamber was silent, eerily so, a perfect cube of obsidian walls. No hum of machinery, no flicker of holoscreens, just emptiness. This was intentional. The aliens wanted to strip away every possible stimulus, until nothing remained but the crushing, suffocating void of silence. They had measured countless species with this test before. The Vorax would last 6 minutes before breaking into guttural roars, begging for sound. The Zixalin, a race of crystalline beings, cracked themselves apart in less than an hour, unable to withstand the absence of vibration. Even the mighty Karthok, who prided themselves on discipline, went mad at the 70-minute mark. The record stood at 2 hours and 37 minutes, a galactic badge of shame, whispered in scientific journals as proof that all sentience craves the comfort of noise, the reassurance of sound. And now, it was the humans' turn. The aliens watched from behind a transparent barrier, monitoring sensors wired to the human skin. They expected fidgeting, nervous humming, desperate attempts to create sound. They expected cracks, like they had seen in every species before. But what they saw was nothing. The humans sat cross-legged in the chamber, spine tall, hands resting gently on their knees. Their breathing was slow, almost imperceptible, their heartbeat a steady rhythm that baffled the monitors. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. The alien observers leaned in closer. The humans' eyes were closed, but not in sleep. They weren't unconscious. They weren't unconscious. They were aware. What is this state? Hissed one alien scientist, tapping furiously at the console. They call it meditation, replied another, scanning through Earth data archives. Meditation, the first scoffed. A trick, a survival reflex. Neither, it appears to be. Voluntary silence. The words unsettled the room. Silence had always been considered the enemy of minds, an endless void that drove creatures to madness. But this human was not fighting it. They were embracing it. 4 hours passed. 5. The human's heartbeat slowed further, dropping into a range the aliens had never recorded before without medical intervention. It was as if the human had shifted into a different mode of existence, one that transcended the biological panic, silence usually invoked. By the 6th hour, the aliens were no longer mocking, they were whispering. Some even shivered. What kind of species could take the very void that shattered civilizations and turn it into peace? The silence was no longer just a test. It had become a revelation. By the 7th hour, the silence in the chamber was not confined to the obsidian cube. It seeped outward, filling the observation room where dozens of alien scientists huddled. The air felt heavy, as though the humans' calm radiated beyond the glass. Several aliens found themselves unconsciously lowering their voices. Some stopped shifting in their seats, their restless appendages stilled. A strange hush fell upon the spectators, not forced, but contagious. The silence, once feared, now commanded them. This shouldn't be possible, muttered Dr. Kratak, her translucent frills trembling. Every known intelligence collapses under this strain. Silence is a predator. It eats thought, and yet the human, whispered another, feeds on it. The human's face was serene, utterly Their lips curled slightly, not in mockery, but in contentment. It was the look of someone drinking from an endless well, while others perished of thirst. One of the younger researchers, bold and curious, asked the question no one dared voice aloud. What if we've been wrong about silence? The room stiffened. Their entire civilization had built doctrines around the dangers of sensory deprivation. To them, silence was corrosive, an annihilator of sanity. But here, before their very eyes, a fragile earthling sat thriving within it. The council leader, a towering figure cloaked in fractal robes, finally spoke. Perhaps this meditation is not endurance, but weaponry. A form of control. A wave of unease spread across the chamber. The idea that humans could use silence, rather than be consumed by it, shifted the balance of perception. Silence had always been the great equalizer, the proof that all species shared the same weakness. If humans were immune, it meant they had access to a power no other race possessed. On the 9th hour, sensors recorded something even stranger. The human's brain activity wasn't declining as expected, it was rising. Patterns flickered across the neural scans, rhythms and pulses that didn't match ordinary thought. What are they doing in there? One alien whispered. They are not asleep, not unconscious. Their mind is reorganizing into what no one could answer. By the 10th hour, the human opened their eyes, calm, steady, piercing, the kind of gaze that didn't just look at the aliens, but through them. For the first time, it was the scientists who broke. Some averted their eyes. Others felt an unfamiliar pressure, as if the silence had turned its focus on them instead of the chamber. The human smiled, slowly, silently, and that smile terrified them more than any scream ever could. The chamber's locks hissed open at the 12-hour mark. No species in the galaxy had ever lasted this long. By all known science, the humans should have been trembling, hallucinating, or unconscious. Instead, they rose with calm precision, stretching as though they had just awoken from restful sleep. The aliens pressed backward against the observation glass as the humans stepped forward unscarred by silence. The council leader spoke first, though his voice faltered. "Explain how you resisted. What sustains you in that void?" The human tilted their head, as if considering whether the answer would even make sense to beings who feared stillness. Finally, they said, voice calm but carrying weight, "Silence is not a predator. It's a companion. We don't fight it, we listen to it." The words hung in the air. The aliens shifted uncomfortably. For them, silence had always been the edge of madness. Yet this fragile creature had turned it into strength. One researcher dared to ask, "Listen, to what?" "There is nothing there." The human smiled faintly. "There is everything. The breath, the heartbeat, the mind itself. We find patterns inside the stillness. It's where we meet who we really are." That answer shook the chamber more than any explosion. The aliens had always fled from silence, filling their lives with constant noise, color, motion. They believed emptiness stripped life away. But the humans suggested the opposite, that silence gave it back. The council leader's frills twitched nervously. "If what you claim is true, then silence is a resource, a power, one we have never dared touch." The human stepped closer, their calm, unsettling in its confidence. "You fear silence because it shows you yourselves. But for us, it's training. A way to sharpen the mind, to master fear. You see fragility. We see resilience." The chamber grew heavier with every word. Aliens who once scoffed at humanity now felt an unfamiliar shiver in their bones. The human wasn't boasting or threatening, they were teaching, and that teaching was far more dangerous than arrogance. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the young researcher who had questioned their beliefs earlier whispered, "Perhaps they are not fragile. Perhaps we are." That sentence spread like a crack through their collective worldview. If humans could survive silence, what else could they endure? What else could they master that the galaxy had overlooked? The human, sensing the shift, gave a simple bow. "Now you know the truth. Fragility isn't in the body, it's in the mind. And ours adapts." Their words echoed like a prophecy. The council chamber did not return to normal after the human left the silence chamber. The air itself felt heavier, weighed down by the realization that something fundamental had shifted. The Zeth who once believed themselves masters of endurance now questioned whether they had ever truly understood strength at all. The elder scholar, her translucent skin still trembling from the human's demonstration, spoke first. "If silence is their training ground, then humans are not fragile, they are forged." The young researcher replied, voice hushed but urgent. "They endured 12 hours without madness. Imagine if they use silence the way we use weapons. What if it makes them stronger every time?" The thought spread like wildfire. In Zerth culture, silence was a destroyer, but in human hands, silence had become a crucible, and a species that could turn death into strength was a species that could not be underestimated. Elsewhere in the ship, ordinary Zerth who had witnessed the trial whispered their fears. Some clutched their frills tight against their bodies, as though silence might seep into their bones. Others stared at the human with awe, unable to reconcile the fragile flesh with the unshakable mind. Meanwhile, the human walked calmly through the corridors, showing no signs of strain. They passed warriors, scholars, and children alike, every gaze following them in stunned reverence. When one alien dared to ask if they needed food or rest, the human only smiled. "Silence is rest." That simple phrase spread faster than any command. The idea that silence once a terror could be a sanctuary unsettled the Zerth to their very core. The council convened again, desperate to decide how to respond. "If one human can endure this," a commander growled, "then what of many? If silence makes them stronger, they may become unstoppable." Another elder countered softly, "Perhaps that is why they fight as they do. Not with brute force, but with minds unbroken by fear. Silence has already trained them." The realization struck them all. Fragile bodies, yes, but inside, humans carried something even weapons could not crush. Their strength was not in muscle or armor, but in adaptation. When the human was finally escorted back to their quarters, they paused at the threshold and turned back to their watchers. Their eyes, calm yet piercing, met the council's. "You thought silence would break me, but silence is where humans learn to bend without breaking, and that is why we endure." The door sealed shut, leaving the Zerth staring at one another. No one dared speak. For the first time in their history, silence filled the chamber and none of them could endure it. And so the legend began, that the fragile species was not fragile at all. For while others feared the void, humans had learned to walk into it willingly, and return stronger than before. They were not prey to silence, they were its masters.